of South Africa, your time is now. You are not just the future, you are the force that can change this country right now. You are the millions sitting in classrooms with no teachers. You are the graduates with no jobs. You are the hustlers, the dreamers, the fighters, and they want you silent. But time for silence is over. The ballot is your weapon. Registering to vote is the first act of defiance. Here's how you do it. Go to www.elections.org.za on your phone or computer. Click Register Online. Enter your ID number and home address, where you live and where you'll vote. Confirm your voting station and boom, you're registered to vote. Don't have internet? No problem. Go to your local IEC office or voter registration station with your green ID book or smart card and register in person. History is made by the brave. Register to vote. Stand up and be counted. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of the EFF podcast here at our offices. My name is Lebohang Mujapilu. I'm the editor here in the communications department. And for this special edition, we are remembering 12 years of the EFF. It will be our 12th anniversary in a few weeks on the 26th of July. And we're very excited with many celebrations in store. But of course, we must have conversations around this. So today, our topic is the EFF and the public imagination. And who better to have than some creative people in our country? So I have two special guests with me here today. I have Mr. Sifiso Kanyile, who is a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, writer, director. And I also have a prominent South African writer, Zukiswa Vaner, who's been writing for many years and is quite popular,
I think you're aging me, this many years thing.
I was doing it more as a thing of experience than aging you. So I'm excited to have these two voices here with me today because they are very significant in the creative landscape, in the output landscape of the films and the work and the writing that are produced in South Africa. And I thought these are the best minds to speak about, thinking about the EFF and what the EFF has represented or been or seen as in South Africa over the past 12 years. So I would like, obviously, you guys to introduce yourselves, maybe tell us more about who you are and what you represent in terms of aligning with EFF or not aligning with EFF. Would you like to start, Ms. Banner?
I think I'll let the documentary filmmaker of the EFF start.
Thanks, Luahang. Thank you for having me. As you've said, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm based in Joburg and I've been making films for about, 12, 13 years now. Mostly political documentary that speaks specifically about the social conditions in South Africa. Often delving a lot into our history, our political history. I use archives a lot also to tell my stories because I think that, a lot of our stories are untold. There's a lot that exists today in sort of like our image, which comes from the apartheid imagination. And we're trying to dismantle those constructs by using documentary filmmaking and really recontextualizing, I guess, what it means, maybe even investigating the national identity. So it's the kind of the work that I'm interested in. And coming to doing work with the EFF, I thought it was a sort of great opportunity for me to speak about the social conditions of Black people in South Africa.
Before you continue, actually, okay. I want to mention that Sifiso is the one who co-directed and produced the EFF documentary on the 10th anniversary.
Yes.
Yes, so please continue.
Yeah, so it was a great opportunity for me to talk about the social conditions of Black South Africans in this country because I don't think we see that enough. We see it enough in the documentary space, but they don't really get out to audiences that much. I'm not sure where a lot of people will watch those kind of documentaries. We know the main sort of streaming platforms have like very particular interests in documentary stories. So there was quite a bit of backlash when I told people in my circles that I was making a film about the EFF, and the criticism was that, oh, are you a propaganda filmmaker now? And the answer is yes, and I believe,
love it.
I believe that everything is propaganda, going back to the formation of like this country when we became the Union of South Africa, the nationalists use film and TV, as propaganda tools for their own ideologies. And I think that if you think about black subjectivity in this country going back as far then, and you watch what exists in the archive, you'll be appalled to see how we've been represented.
Yes.
And, there were passages in time where I think with the beginning of, like, say, or after Sharpeville, and then there was 1976, where, we start to see images that sort of fight against apartheid propaganda. But a lot of them are also still centered in black victimhood.
Yes.
And you understand this because we had to show the world what was happening in terms of like the brutalities of apartheid and try and gain their sympathies in as far as divestments. But it's also still strips away from who we are. We don't see ourselves fighting. All the time,
That's a very important one.
We're dying in the archive, and so I think any opportunity to tell the stories of our resistance as a people, that sort of give us agency in terms of as far as like black representation is concerned in on screens in South Africa, is a great one.
Yes, so I want to just go to, I actually realized this the other day as I was doing some research for it. The first film of yours that I actually watched was Spider-Man and Romeo,
Okay.
which is a film about train surfers in Soweto. I remember watching it years ago, and I always found it fascinating, these young kids who are living on the edge. But I just found it to be just a very interesting aspect of our society or a culture within certain spaces of doing it. And I just realized that, it was made by him. And then obviously there's Uprise, where you go back to 1976 and you kind of retrace and say, what have we not seen? What have we not heard? And then more recently, there's A New Country, and then there's The Reclaimers, which I also found interesting because it's about collectors of rubbish and recyclers in Johannesburg, which are people who are like invisible, but still very much present in our society. Yeah. And they're doing an actual job, and they have a life, even though we see them as marginal. Yeah. So it's this very interesting stories that you're doing. You're going back into the archive and carrying stories from the past to make sure that we see them again in a new light and find new ways of seeing them. But at the same time, you are making sure that whatever is happening now as well is being told. And I feel like this is exactly what you're doing, what you did with the EFF documentary. There is a history, and we need to document where the EFF has come from and where they are now. And so there's like a dual thing happening with your work.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I think that, everything is connected. There's still very much a part of our history that forms part of our lived experiences and identities today, spatially in terms of like, apartheid spatial planning, where people live, townships were designed to be labor reservoirs, for people to just come into the economic centers and then leave. We're the most unequal society in the world today. That is not coincidental. We also have, and you see this in The New Country, where we interrogate the 1994 moment, or what's usually considered the miracle moment, and asking questions about whose miracle,
Yes, whose miracle?
What did it benefit? So and I guess working with archives a lot, you see the evidence of that. You see that, we live with our history,
yes.
every waking life, every day,
Yes.
we walk with it. And, speaking about the present, and I think that because the 1994 moment, in some ways, really erased a lot of the atrocities of the past to
Yes,
try and create,
we were. Rainbow, great.
yeah, to create this new image, like the South African, the exception, of this exceptional nation
Yes.
that was able to sort of like rebuild itself in a new image that is the rainbow image and all of that. There's a lot of stories that were left untold. A lot of injustice happened then. And so that also kind of emboldens people who come from like the right wing, what we see now, where we, so at the White House recently,
Yes.
we discussed that, people can claim a white genocide.
Yes.
And as fickle as it is, but they still, have the audacity to build evidence around
it, yes.
out of a myth.
Yeah.
And speaking of myth, I mean, this country is a myth. I think that there's a lot that happens in sort of the myth-making space.
Yes.
And so it becomes important for people, for storytellers like myself and Zugiswa, to tell the real stories. To say that not only does this thing not exist, but it's actually the opposite.
The opposite is true.
Yeah,
Yes.
And so then it's always been important for me then to unearth, the history of our resistance in this country, because then it connects the dots.
Yes.
It contextualizes why movements like the EFF exist and had to exist, because the liberation project never really stopped.
Okay. I'm going to have to
silenced.
stop you there because I feel like we could listen to you for a while. Let me bring in Zugiswa Vaner and once again speak a bit about yourself and the EFF and the public imagination.
All right. I'm Zugiswa, and I am a writer, primarily a novelist, but I'm also, I've done journalistic type of writing as well. And one of my, and I always think of the imagination as something interesting. In my novels, which is how I first got into the public imagination, I reckon, I think of it as I'm keen to highlight the personal as political all the time. Even in what we see as ordinary lives, I always think that is such an important thing to do, and to leave you with thinking about stuff thereafter. The last, I've done travel, I've done children's books, but the last...
You've also been an editor and a publisher.
Exactly. And the last nonfiction thing that I did, though, the last nonfiction book that I did, is actually a long-form essay on Palestine.
Yes.
Which vignettes of a people in an apartheid state. And it came out of my having traveled to Palestine in 2023, but before October 7th. And what was interesting with that particular trip was finding out, and this is part of the reason why I'm a bit of an internationalist in my outlook, finding out that one of the largest group of settlers are white South Africans.
Yes.
And
Within
Afrikaners.
Israel.
Yes, in Israel. So they're getting money from here to go and become settlers and displace Palestinians. So if we think that this is none of our business, you soon realize how similar it is. Similarly, I was just recently in Brazil, and I went to a couple of the favelas, and at one, I remember there's women who are fighting not to be removed, but they are being removed, and they've been told they're going to be removed to a better place or something like that, because they don't want them. They don't want them in the city center, and allegedly because now they're going to put a park there, despite the fact that they have managed to maintain the greenery in the area. But what was particularly fascinating for me in this particular space was how one of the main things that has been criticized was they were told that there was a proliferation. Part of the reason why they were being moved was there was a proliferation of drugs and there was a proliferation of guns in this area. And this was particularly interesting because I had been doing, towards the end of November, I did a tour around the country for something chose to call South Africa at 30, looking at that historical moment, and talking to farm workers, talking to people in health, in education. These were the key ones. I was looking at farm, land and mines, education, health, and water, and employment. And what was interesting in traveling and just talking to the ordinary people in villages and farms, and all these different people, and then also talking to people who were in their leadership, whether it was the unions at that pivotal moment when COSATU was formed, for instance, in 1986, 87, the big marches, and how did COSATU end up aligning with the African National Congress, for instance, and also finding out how South African Communist Party came to the party. They essentially did the policy documents of most of the left narrative that the ANC spoke, despite the fact that they were walking right, and they continued doing so. Now they don't even lie about it.
So you are telling us the ANC has always been walking right.
They've always been walking right, but they talk left.
Okay.
Now they don't even try. The most talk left that they do is call you comrade. But I think then in some way then it was very pivotal for the economic freedom fighters to come into the space, in South Africa, because I often joke with everybody, joke no jokes. I often joke about how every time anything happens in places, people always say, they tag the EFF on social media.
Yes.
And they say, you find people say, oh, I've been fired, I'm going to the EFF labor desk and stuff and everything. But, when it matters, they're not coming through for the EFF. So I'm like, I need to understand how this works.
Yes.
How does it work that these are the people you go to when you need something, when you need somebody to cause a noise or whatever, but you don't really make any changes. So essentially, as I was doing this trip, I found out that a lot of things are not what they seem. I think I remember spending a good 2 weeks in bed because I was just like, oh my God, we don't have a country. And for sure we don't. We don't even have the dignity of a name. We've got a geographical location.
We do. In fact, South Africa robbed Southern Africa from having South Africa, West Africa, East Africa.
You see.
You have, like you said, you have a geographical location.
Yeah.
So I want to...
And that's not mine, by the way. That's Sihle Kumalo's.
Is that Sihle Kumalo? Okay, we're going to quote him. I want you guys to go back. Let's go back to July 2013. And it comes out on the news that the EFF has been formed. Julius Malema has, at the head, and it's going to be a new party. Where are you? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Same thing when in 2024 they get elected, they're there in parliament, they make their debut. Those two moments. Where are you? What are you thinking? Where are you? Yeah. What is your vision of the future of the EFF, or even the present of the EFF then?
Right. Speaking as somebody who had last voted for the ANC in 1999, I was like, okay, let's see. I was a bit suspicious, to be honest, because I was like, these guys are coming from the ANC. We're just going to get ANC light. But there was also that thing where I was absolutely, totally furious because remember, Marikana had just happened.
Yes, it was.
And I was
on the
thinking,
back of Marikana.
how is this possible to happen in this country from a government that's supposedly for us, And of course, we got the whole narrative about never again, and then we saw Stilfontein.
Exactly.
So, so I was like, okay, let's see. And because of who I am and because of my job, I'm the kind of person who actually reads and try to see what is the police position. So I was like, okay, we'll see, and I allowed that moment. And by the time that 2014 came around, I thought, well, let me try this, guys. Let's see. But importantly, because now we're getting stuff like Roads Must Fall and stuff, and I was like, let me see. I'm curious, and if they don't work, we'll vote them out. I always believe in that. If this doesn't, let's try it out. If it doesn't work, because these guys, I tried them out and they didn't work.
Yes.
Interesting. So, 2013. I think there was a lot of mistrust. I think if we're all being honest, the mainstream media in South Africa had butchered the image of like Julius Malema, going back from say 2011 up until that moment. It was a concerted effort, and so I think there was a lot of mistrust. So even though there was a lot of curiosity, a lot of people were saying, "We'll see what's going to happen." And I think to a great degree, I was one of those people. But I was starting to ask a lot of questions because, funny enough, I was closely affiliated with Rehad Desai at the time, who was making
Minor Showdown.
Yes.
The film about Marikana. And funny enough, I was one of the first people that he called to go out right after the massacre happened. We went to Moinoi, and I think is it Archbishop Makgoba, who was there, and we interviewed him, and we went around filming some stuff, and we weren't allowed to really go to the Kopi. Things were still quite heated at the time, and I think that there was kind of a rude awakening. We're at a time when the whole idea of the Rainbow Nation, I think, was starting to be questioned,
I think it started being questioned at about, personally, I started questioning it around 2008, I think. Yeah. Right around the time where I was questioning, I remember reading one of these non-black columnists, and he said something about how we must give Zuma a chance and stuff and everything.
That moment.
And at that moment, because I was looking at it from a very from a political history of the continent, and I remembered that there was this thing that happened when you look at the history of this continent. You look at maybe with I'm not saying Msholos is like Idi Amin, but but it was when how certain Europeans propped up the British, propped up Idi Amin, for instance, or they propped up certain people in Ghana and stuff, and every time somebody would or Mobutu Sese Seko, they because they're like, oh, this one we can control him because we don't think that he's very clever. And then they get surprised when that person gives a pushback,
and then moves differently.
You won't. And so at that moment, that's when I started questioning. I'm like, in whose interest is this happening? But also you begin to see, there was this thing where a lot of us were thinking, if I stay in the burbs and this and that, everything is fine. But when you put on, and I think I play with it in Love, Marry, Kill now, when you put on the television and you look at advertising, for instance, Black people are singing for bread, they're dancing for tea. Why are we always singing and dancing in adverts?
No, for sure.
Okay, so your breaking point was around 2008, where you're beginning to really look at this Rainbow Nation disintegrate, and this for you, your moment is Marikana. Something is happening. 2013.
Because remember, Mandela was in hospital at the time also. I think the bigger conversation at the time was about whether or not Mandela sold out. There was coming from
those questions are beginning to filter into normal conversations
from student movements and filtering into normal conversations. And I think that
and whether we're all going to kill white people.
A lot of us,
after Mandela died. They
because
did say.
a lot of us weren't even, I think, prepped for a radical politic.
No.
Yeah, I think it was just, I outlandish, you know, if you even entertained, questions around, what is it, national expropriation without compensation, or nationalizing the mines, and which are perfectly normal.
Yes,
Things
and
to
had
expect,
been
exactly.
in the
transition
yes.
like ours. You know, there were things that were being discussed in the ANC in the 1940s and 50s.
Yes.
And so it became interesting for me, and I think that I kind of looked at it as an outsider. To see what was going to happen. I think I only started really sort of like buying into the ideas and ideals a lot after maybe 2015, 2014, 2015, to say, you know, this is something that I could align to, you know. This is on a personal level now, you know, because ideologically there's a lot that makes sense for me personally, you know. And so, yeah, just, you know, answering your question, it was around that time, and this was my response to it.
Your response to it. Yeah.
I had actually I think in 2004 and 2009, the previous national elections, I'd voted like a Zapo, I think it was, because
I was
like
going to ask, because
yeah.
I was thinking maybe you were going to say you voted for COPE in 2009.
No. I'd voted as Zapo.
You were actually quite,
like I was always
yes.
looking at that particular position, because I think one of the things that bothered me so much, and that has bothered me quite a lot, is the fact that as far as mines are concerned, as an example, I don't understand how we have, we're still an extractive country. People
Yes.
take the raw materials and they take it out. The same way they were doing when Cecil John Rhodes was like, you know, seeing diamonds, taking the Cullinan from us, you know. I don't understand that we're okay with the fact that we've got geologists, we've got engineers, and they go to maybe like Canada and Switzerland and they work there to purify our material. But additionally, I don't understand the idea that the people who go underground to dig for gold cannot buy their daughters like a gold studs for metric tons. How does that work? You know, and then they die, you know, with like
Silicosis.
exactly. So I don't understand that, and I've never understood that, and I think that has always been something that has bothered me immensely.
Yeah, okay. So and so it's completely understandable, because I think that moment of Marikana was a breaking point in, I think, complete politics in South Africa, to be people asking like, where are we really? And I'm enjoying what you're saying about how I think the radical politic had really just left. It was pockets of it. There were, you know, people like Zuku were still like, no, we're still on it.
No, my whole thing. I didn't even think that they were going to win. My whole thing is like, even if we have one person who's going to voice their whatever in parliament,
their voice was still important. But I think for a lot of people, there was a lull. We are within the dream. We are within, but the dream is still not coming to life. But maybe if we push a bit further, something is still going to happen.
Hard. And then if you pull yourself by the bootstraps, you know, and then you realize, Pela, what we only got is now we can walk on the sidewalk.
I mean,
we can also go into CBD now. We can also be going to nice restaurants.
But we'd also sort of come off the crass materialism of like the late 2000s.
Late 2000s,
exactly.
Oh, yes.
You know. And you know, it was consumption was at sort of like
at its peak.
Was foregrounded at its peak. Thank you. And then there was
like
banks are offering you loans for your Audi, and then they shall take it back.
Yeah, and they won't give you loans for a business.
But the Audi.
Yeah. And also then, you know, we had 2010, and I think, you know, it was a very interesting transition at that time, you know. And I remember I was working in international media. I was working for ABC News America. When with the BBC, when at Luthuli House, when Julius Malema was still part of the ANC Youth League, and you know, he chased out the BBC.
David Smith, wasn't it?
David Smith,
the BBC correspondent. And I think for a lot of South Africans, even to see an interaction like that between a young black
man,
South African and, a white correspondent journalist, foreign, who represents, this, sort of almost monolithic in terms of influence in the media space, the BBC, was unheard of, And so I think then we start to play with, we started to play with like these ideas of like colonization and like actually in real action, what does that look like, And, there was also groups like SNI at the time who were doing a lot of that work. And so, so for me, it was a really interesting moment in how the country's politics were shifting, to look more black, speak more black, but also, where workers could get a voice. And especially, Maracana then becomes like a turning point in terms of like workers' rights in this country and and their agency.
Yeah, because at some point, even the workers' unions themselves seemed kind of toothless or maybe not as prominent. And
they're even less toothless now.
Yeah. Yes. So there's this Maracana happens. EFF comes through, they start speaking again the radical language, expropriation, nationalization, but there is a large pushback from the media. Like from the moment EFF comes forward, there's a large pushback. But I remember within certain circles, it's like, oh, this is interesting. Let's listen a little bit more. However, media-wise, it was the Swat Kavar.
It's worth
the
asking
blacks
who
have
owns the
come
media.
and they are talking and they're loud and they're about to kill us all and they're about to do something disastrous.
It's worth asking who owns the media. I'm old enough to remember when this somehow remember the Black Editors Forum, editors in general, and then it was called. It had to be dismantled because they were like, no, this is illegal. You can't have black editors and journalists coming together. And because it's discriminatory, it's racist. In a country where Orania is allowed to exist.
Who owns the media? And that makes a difference.
Yeah. We touched upon this a little bit earlier when we were outside. That's the idea of black or Swargafar, Black Danger, the Night of the Long Knives, never really left, I think, the South African white imagination.
No.
And we see it with the white genocide campaign. Is that it's a sustained campaign that existed for a long time. I work in the film space, and I'm also aware of films that were produced to, quell or silence white fears, or, films like Going to Soweto, for example, were funded by the apartheid government to make us seem palatable as a people, Like as a white woman, you can go to Soweto, get lost, and nothing will happen to you.
They will help you.
So when we talk about propaganda, it's not, a lot of the time we're thinking the 70s, the 50s, maybe even the 1900s, but it's something that's happened as recently as like the early 90s.
Yeah.
Bruv, your entire president went to quell Donald Trump. Like, there's no way, genocide.
And I want to get your thoughts on this because I was just in shock. Like I was watching routinely so that I could work. We write statements or whatever, respond to it. And that moment where Donald Trump goes, well, they were sitting just like this. It goes like, look. And then the first thing I hear is CIC. I'm like, wait a minute, where are we? This is something I'm thinking about, like from the moment where EFF comes into power and it's like the blacks have started and it's the crazy ones who are going to take everything we have. And 12 years later, in a bilateral meeting in the White House between two presidents, CIC Julius Malema is being played there.
But why was President
what's going on?
Ramaphosa going there though?
Yeah. Because it didn't even
Yeah.
say
So
there's
you
no
don't think
white
he should have been
General
there?
No. I think it was an absolute. We knew what was happening to start with. We knew what
That
was
it was
happening.
a trap in
It
terms
wa-
of the
it was
white
a-
genocide?
Hey, we had already seen Zelensky. Come on.
Yeah.
Yes, we
We
had
had seen-
a very
the
embarrassing
world had
moment for
seen-
Zelensky.
Yeah, the world had seen Zelensky. So now you are going to go there because what? You've got an English accent. Come on, man, you know? So we'd already seen that. But I also really resent the fact that our leaders, and this includes former President Thabo Mbeki, are always placating whiteness. What was that nonsense of writing an 11-page love letter to No Matric John? What was going on there? You know, so it's constantly like trying. So it's like
This is the letter he
Yeah.
wrote to John
Yeah,
Steenhuisen
about- yeah.
about the retreating from the national
retreating
dialogue.
from the national dialogue. Yes.
Oh, I love you calling it a love letter. I enjoy this.
because it's like constantly, you know, and this is the thing, and I call our leaders, not just here, by the way, but on the whole continent. They're like colonial clerks of the empire, you know, because they never ask us. The only time that they engage with us is when they're trying to get our vote. But all the other time, they are constantly telling us, and this is essentially what happened. We saw it last year before the elections, where constantly there was this onslaught about how the EFF will chase away external investors. Why do external investors matter more than we do? Why don't they matter as much? Why don't we matter as much as external investors? You know, the citizens should be like above all else. When you go to a lot of these global north countries, their citizens matter more than we do, more than any external investor, more than anybody else. But here, constantly, we're like, oh, okay, I'm going to, Lebo is going to get a job through a labor broker, etc. And it's not even a quality job, but somehow the person who's coming with that job is more important than your livelihood, than the fact that after 6 months you might not be able to plan for your children on how you're going to pay their bills, how you're going to pay their school fees, and so forth and so on. Although we shouldn't have to pay for school fees.
Yeah, I think what we also need to take into recognition is that even during our negotiations, what took a lot of attention was guarantees for minority rights. You know, the fact that white people will still have a place in democratic South Africa. You know, so this idea keeps reinforcing itself.
Exactly.
And when you ask questions about why former President Thabo Mbeki has to respond to John, it's because it's part of that project. You know, the to be like in this, you know, democratic dispensation, white people have a place in South Africa, and we have to keep sort of reinforcing that idea, you know, and neglecting, you know,
Majority,
the millions
we've got
Africans
the highest.
aren't even getting service delivery. You know, our kids still dying in pit toilets, but we still have to turn the gaze. Turn our gaze towards white sensibilities, white comfort levels, because that's the promise that they made.
I like that because there's two things happening in that moment in the White House, right? Cyril is being, you know.
And then as if that's not bad enough, another bunch of African presidents were like, we're going as well.
And he's brought, you know, the good whites. You know, he's brought a team of, you know, Johan Rupert. He's got, is it any else? Who is he got?
Any else?
To just also look good. And then...
And a golf book.
Yes, of course, the gift. And then, so there's this moment, right, where Cyril knows that the white genocide is not a thing. Donald Trump knows that white genocide is not a thing. But it is still Cyril's responsibility to take Trump seriously and then placate him further to be like, no, but we're not really killing them. But also not do it at the same time. Malema comes onto the screen and he can't even defend that. He's like, no, that's a minority. You know, they're not really part of us. You know, we are
And
the
it's not
Why
even
don't you arrest
mentioning,
them?
it's not
blacks. We
even
are the
mentioning
good
that the
blacks.
courts said it's
No, exactly.
okay, you know? But he's coming there with Ernie, with John, with whatever, trying to highlight how some of his best friends are white.
Yes.
Bruh.
For something that everyone in that room knows is not happening. But
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
the myth must be maintained because certain power structures must be maintained, and we must continue to defend that we're not killing white people when even everyone knows that it's actually not happening. Like,
It was a really disappointing moment, and I was probably as appalled as you were, you know, for the fact that, you know, as you say, our courts, you know, had found that the song isn't hate speech. But there's also something to be said about how we center our humanity as Black South Africans, and that at every turn we don't have a right to talk about our struggle, and you know, to make our narrative popular, right? Because we don't have maybe now, you know, museums that might focus. I mean, you have the Apartheid Museum, which is, you know, privately owned. You know, it's, you know, the narrative is controlled by people who weren't on, you know, siding with us, you know.
yeah.
And I think that it becomes important then. The Voortrekker Monument still exists. It is allowed to exist. Up until recently, the brandishing of the apartheid flag was considered hate speech. And so what do we have to hold on to as something that centered our humanity during apartheid? It's the songs that brought us together.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? That helped us organize. That, you know, so I think even without taking the contents of the song too much into context, that kind of history should not be allowed to not exist.
To not exist.
Because it's what shaped our humanity during our resistance struggle.
So, but that's
But
what
I
they're
mean,
fighting against.
you're also having these people fighting this little thing. Yet, in addition to Voortrekker Monument, they sing De La Rey. They're okay with De La Rey.
They are.
So it's like we're not supposed to have any pain, and it's even more interesting when you have somebody like Helen, who is Jewish origin, and she will talk about, like, if anybody were to say Jews must forget about the Holocaust, which happened, by the way, like, you know, 80 years ago, it would be like, you are anti-Semitic. And there is every right to say that. But somehow she doesn't see the irony of telling us, forget about apartheid because that was 30 years ago. Why are we supposed to why is our pain so unimportant? But more so because in order for peace to be made, in order for peace to exist, the absence of war is not peace. No. But in order for peace to exist, somebody needs not only to apologize, but there must be restitution. And there hasn't been restitution for Black people in this country. Not at all.
And also just wanted to respond a little bit to what Zugiso was saying about South Africa, that we don't have a country. And in every sense, we don't have a country, because if you take into consideration our flag, the flag was designed for the national unity government, which was an interim government.
This is post. This is 1995.
1995.
Okay.
For a country to really gain independence, there are certain pillars that need to change. You know, the country's national anthem. Now that you mentioned the national anthem, we have the stem.
As part of our whatever. It's a remix anthem.
A song that they sang while, you know, killing our activists.
And combining it with something as powerful as Nkosi Sikelel.
Yeah.
Like, ow, guys.
No, and they took off the best part, by the way.
Yeah.
Like,
at every EFF event, we sing the hymn, Nkosi Sikelele Africa, and we sing it in Sesotho. We don't sing the stem. We are protesting.
So we have a butchered national anthem that incorporates the stem, a song that was used for bloodshed, for the bloodshed of our people. We didn't change our currency. We still use Kruger's Rand. We didn't change the name of the country, which often happens during, independence.
Thank you.
And again, the flag was, designed for the national unity government. So there's no facet of.
Listen, Orlando Pirates fan club has a flag of their own, and they can vote for their chairman every now and again. They seem more independent than us.
Wow, they have more of an identity and a union than South Africans do. And I think then we cannot. And I think going back to what you're saying, the censoring of Black humanity in South Africa, that until there is no nation, and we cannot speak of a South Africa until Black people are able to express that, for us to be able to tell our stories freely, and for that to be what is at the forefront. And I think maybe perhaps that is why they fight the EFF so much. Because the EFF speaks about Blackness and Black pain and Black life and Black needs and Black battles. And sometimes it's as if the EFF is always fighting.
Yeah.
No, but imagine all of us being held hostage by 8% and 8% of the population, and nobody sees what's wrong with that. Nobody sees the fact that, it's our constitution will be 30 years in 2026. Nobody questions the fact that, who owns the majority of the land? Who owns the majority of the mines? Who owns the majority of the factories? How many companies are listed on the JSE stock exchange that are actually we owned? And then there's this obsession, during apartheid. This was particularly fascinating for me while I was doing research. State-owned enterprises existed to provide a service, not to make a profit.
True.
And yet we get situations where now Eskom, it must be a private-public partnership. Why? Transnet is non-existent.
They're selling ports.
What do you call it? Posta has been destroyed. Post office has been destroyed so thoroughly. And now we've got Postnet, which is a New Zealand company doing the job.
Yes.
And being just as inefficient as we claimed that post office was. And of course, I think some of you guys have seen it. I've done a bit of beefing online with certain right-wing journalists, but there is also now this where you see this push to try and privatize water.
Yes.
What next?
Indeed.
Air.
Yeah. So I mean, there definitely is a push towards privatizing everything. And I mean, it starts with making it a disaster. I mean, SAA was sold for 51 Rand at some point. Where this is, I think, maybe one of the examples of not only is our humanity not recognized, it's like they're mocking us to a certain extent, because by the time you are making a deal, such as the Takatso deal, where you're selling SAA for a stake in the highest majority stake in SA for 51 Rand, there's no respect at all. There's a mockery that is happening. So when we're looking at the landscape of South Africa now, where are we politically, and where do we need to be going?
Yeah.
What do we need to be thinking about?
I think that we really need to do a lot of work in conscientizing South Africans, because there's a lot of Black South Africans who are working against our liberation struggle because they've been co-opted.
I call them non-whites myself.
Hey, are we going back to people now?
Black people, and then they're non-whites.
Yeah. And some of them sit in comfortable positions and draw a lot of influence. For the fact that it's so difficult to get us organized around a particular idea, political idea.
Yes.
There's a lot, and people are scared. People are scared of like losing
I'll
their
lose
social
my
positions,
job.
they're losing their jobs.
I've got school fees to pay, etc.
And
at Kuro schools.
Yeah. And so on an ideological level, I think that there's still a lot of work to do. I mean, the EFF is 12 years today, but I think they need to gear up for a lot of work that still needs to happen ahead in conscientizing Black South Africans into seeing what the EFF project is. What do we talk about when we talk about liberating the Black child? Yes, 40 years ago we were fighting guns and legislation, apartheid legislation, and now we're fighting the economic struggle, which also hides itself so very well when you talk about who owns the means of production. It would be very hard for us today if we said, look, let's wake up tomorrow and go find those people and attack them. And so it really is for me about like conscientizing people in knowing what it is that they deserve.
Wow.
And claiming it, and I mean, I do the work that I do because I strongly believe in that.
Yeah.
I think to add to that, there is something where our people have been messed up for a long time. And I hear it in conversations. They're like, the EFF, it wants to open borders, So this is something that's said often, right? And, and it comes back to what I was saying about internationalism, you look at El Dorado Park, for instance. I was there, and Uber can't get into El Dorado Park, because children have guns. So when you get into El Dorado Park, when I was doing the South Africa 30, we actually had to meet somebody at the center, and we had to take one of the cabs that are there that you have to take, because you can't get into an Uber like that. Cape Flats, certain places, etc. But what we're not asking, and a lot of the noise is like, these foreigners, of course, foreigners are Black people. And this is part of the re-education that we need to understand that, you can't be a foreigner on African soil to start with, but also beyond that, or they're doing this, they're bringing drugs and stuff and everything. We're seeing, even with Mkwana Zinda, what we found out, the people who bring in the drugs are people who stay in the Basonias, because they can bring like tons. The people who nobody in the townships makes guns.
No.
Nobody in the townships would know how to like bring in a ton of drugs. Across borders or whatever, and which policeman or head of police to bribe or whatever it is. Nobody would know that. So why aren't we asking ourselves those questions? Furthermore, with the means of production, you're looking at a restaurant and you'll say, this restaurant, they only employ non-South Africans and stuff. Who owns the restaurant? Why, instead of like making a noise about, there is a waiter from Mozambique or from Zimbabwe or whatever, why isn't our question, this boss who owns, what we should be doing is we should be getting together with the Zimbabwean waiter and the Mozambican waiter and us, and we're like, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. Hey, let's ask this boss, what's the minimum wage? Yes. Are you getting insurance? Are you getting this? Are you getting this? All the things that a person should be getting. Those are the things. So the question, you saw, there was a whole restaurant owners association that said how, the Labor Act shouldn't be adhered to.
Oh, wow.
Because we need workers from outside. And yet...
So they want workers from outside and the Labor Act removed.
Yes,
so
because having South African workers is too expensive, is what
because
they say.
Because you have to actually adhere to the law.
To the law, yes.
South African.
You'd have to pay UIF, you'd have to pay all these things.
I mean, we
even saw this two-port system. How many companies, and majority of these companies are white-owned, had not been paying. UIF had not been paying pension, had not been paying the things that they needed to pay. So my whole thing is, instead of playing, we are busy fighting. There's like 100 cookies. We're busy fighting for one cookie as Black people. And the boss, the owner of the company, has 99 cookies and just throws that and says to Black South Africans, well, look, the Zimbabwean has your cookie, and says to the Zimbabwean, oh, you speak pretty good English when you hold that cookie. And then we fight amongst each other, you see.
So Zukiswa touched on something that I actually, during the last elections, because it was family members, I just made the EFF film and I was very excited. I'm, distributing the link for them to watch. And they're like, wow, great work. But we're still not going to vote for them because they want to open borders.
Oh, yes.
No, I had that in my family group as well.
It was so tragic because they didn't understand the ideal, the fullness of the ideal in terms of, uniting as a Pan-Africanist bloc and, trading as a unit. As a unit. And because we own, or we have most of the natural resources on this continent, therefore we can dictate the terms around it. And a lot of Black South Africans don't understand this. When they hear, uniting or unifying as a continent, and for them it's just, they're coming in, you're opening the borders.
Listen, if this had been done, jobs. By the way, if this had been done, firstly, if this had been done, we'd have been like saying, oh, Angola has oil. We've got oil refineries.
Yes.
So what we'll do is we'll refine, and as a continent, this is the price we're going to set for the petrol and whatever. And we wouldn't have petrol and diesel as high as it is. But importantly, we'd be like, we wouldn't have had Cyril Ramaphosa going to the White House because we'd be so strong as a bloc.
Precisely.
When you have ASEAN countries, for instance, they are strong as a bloc. You look at the EU. I mean, obviously now they decided that they want to be like puppets of the US, but they were strong as a bloc. So you'd be like, okay, economically, and you think about it as a continent, all the resources that they need are actually on this continent, from uranium to diamonds to gold and, everything that they need.
And we wouldn't have situations like we wouldn't have Sudan, we wouldn't have DRC, we wouldn't have Somalia,
everything that
we would actually, because all of these things are happening because of those resources. I mean, the idea of like you're bringing in maize, like Kenya's bringing in maize from Ukraine or whatever on this continent, on African soil,
with all the farmland that we have, and we've got land lying fallow here, by the way, So it's like lacking in imagination, but it's also like, so there needs to be an education, as Sfiso has so brilliantly highlighted. But I think the other thing, particularly as we're going towards local elections, I think it's so important for the EFF to articulate its position on things that a lot of people don't realize affect them. So, for instance, you look at water. Water is run by the municipality, Joburg Water, So you would go there and you say to people, this is what we've done with local whatever, security. How are we going to sort this out, and so forth and so on? How do we get rid of, for instance, guns in a place like El Dorado Park, And you can even like use it to like, work against your enemies. Oh, guys, the person in charge of security right now is this person from this particular party. And look now, But the other thing that I think is very important is there's a lack of recreational places.
Yes,
for
that is true.
Black people. If you look at the Melvilles and stuff, you've got the gardens, you've got Emerentia, you've got, Westine, you've got whatever, you've got places where, but we don't have recreational parks we don't have, there aren't any recreational parks in the townships. There aren't functioning swimming pools where they used to exist. There aren't functioning libraries, or if they exist, like for instance, Orlando East Library, you get in there, they're like books from like 19 roads or something like that, you know? So there is a need to like just really like, if the EFF could come up and say like, this is what we're doing, we need to get into neighborhoods and stuff, because local elections are about the people that you see.
Yes. Well, like you said, the personal is political. I'm remembering just before we round up, so when Sfiso was filming, when they were filming the documentary, part of it was F&B, the 10th anniversary celebrations at F&B. So as much as I was part of the team, I wasn't aware of this extravagant moment that happens where CIC rises. So I mean, it's like an incredible thing. Like it breaks the internet. Everyone does. The first thing after, I mean, like when we're done and we come back, Sifiso is like behind the scenes. He's like, Lebo, you need to come and see this. I think he has the best shots. Front and center of that moment where CIC comes there and he rises and there is. But I mean, that moment of F&B, like filling a stadium of almost 100,000 people, the economic freedom fighters 10 years later, like, is that not an incredible thing?
Sure. Can I take you somewhere else first?
Yes.
And for me was the stadium in Polokwane. The really last year.
This is after the last one,
Just
before the
before
elections.
Just before elections.
Tela Tupa in Polokwane.
Tela Tupa
Yes.
in Polokwane, where we screened the film.
Yes, the first
and
screening.
we had to rush to get it ready for that screening. It screened in a stadium in front of 85,000 people.
Wow.
The stadium was filling up. It was during the day. The sun was out. So the screen wasn't even clear. People were sort of like squinting their eyes to see it. But this was such an important moment for me because, I mean, cinema in South Africa especially is such an extension of like bourgeois culture.
It's become elitist.
Yeah, it's very much like elitist, you know. It's not accessible to the people, even festivals.
Yeah, festivals happen in Rosebank, they happen in Sandton.
Yeah, we don't have
in the
cinemas
nice places.
in the townships. They're closing, and there's the only time you'll see that anywhere else in the world is Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
With FESPACO.
Yeah, with FESPACO.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Africa's second oldest film festival in the world. I'm sorry, on the continent, and the biggest on the continent. And when you go to Burkina Faso, and this is something that Thomas Sankara entrenched in the people to say we'll also use or we'll need cinema.
Cinema as a tool.
As a liberation tool,
Yeah.
and helped establish FESPACO. So when you're there, Umama who's selling amatamati on the side of the road will ask you about a film that was screening the night before because she saw it somewhere. So we don't have a cinema culture that will even closely resemble that in a couple of years. And so for me, that experience was mind-blowing as a filmmaker to say, I've made a film, it's screening at a stadium to 85,000 people. And people are laughing at the point where they're meant to laugh.
They're
going with the flow. I was nervous, and so you're like, oh, this part should be funny. People must laugh. And,
I can imagine what it feels like doing a documentary of the EFF. Of course, there's going to be nervousness.
So that kind of response for me and that experience was mind-blowing. But yes, going back to F&B, I mean, you can imagine how electrifying it was, from the moment they came out of the tunnels to go to the leadership came out of the tunnels to go to the stage, and us having full access, like as you said, we managed to get some of the best shots that was there, but it was such I love Black people, and to see them come together, gather around a single idea, and you can get 90,000 people in a single
in
place,
one place,
in one voice.
That's awesome.
For me, it matters less what it is that we're doing. It's like if we manage to do that I think it's such an incredible thing.
No, but Black Joy is such an amazing thing to watch, right? It's incredible.
Extremely.
And for me, there's also a tonality to what Black Joy is and how we celebrate ourselves and how we can be free. Because I think in a lot of spaces, man, there's the kind of like Black Joy light. We have
to monitor ourselves because we don't know whether we're too
we don't know
loud.
who's watching.
Who's watching? Are we doing? Is there the right etiquette?
Am I laughing too loud, or is the aircon too high? Is it too hot?
Somebody once said that. Some non-black who came over when we were sitting in a restaurant in Cape Town, Nohal, and say, "Excuse me, can you keep it down a little bit?" And I'm like, these are the voices we had when we had land.
Yeah. So it's also about like ownership of spaces.
Yes, being able to own a space,
Yeah.
completely like you belong and it's yours and there's freedom.
You don't see that a lot.
No.
And you'll definitely see it in EFF spaces.
I get surprised at how many people come to our rallies and spend the whole day there. And are part of everything and are excited to be there, like every single time. It's an incredible thing to see. But please go on about Black Joy.
Yeah, but I'm also asking myself now that you're saying that, like, what does it look like to have, Black Joy that isn't monitored, and also that isn't like happens in pockets. That isn't ephemeral, where it's like, okay, we go and then we do this.
And then where we're going to be happy.
Where
but
we can
in
be,
a general
where we can be free, even when we go home and we clean.
I know, right? I think,
take off our shoes. And,
I think that's a thing though. Like when you're on the rest of the continent and stuff, where you just get with your tribe, and not necessarily like get with somebody like. South Africa sometimes puts you in a place where you try and find where the black person is, and you're going to hang out with them anyway, not because you necessarily get along, but because this is the only black person here, bruh. So the idea that you can just be, just laugh, just be, and constantly like, I think I see it with my son because he grew up in East Africa, then he was in Zim, and now he's here, and he's just like. His outlook, despite being South African, his outlook at the way that he owns spaces and stuff, and is like, I'm not gonna allow somebody to mute me, to whatever, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
And I think it's essential for the young people, as much as they fight for what we consider to be like very political ideals, but what young people are fighting for when they're saying roads must fall, fees must fall. Or anything that they're fighting for. It's really that freedom to be. It's when they're in the university spaces, they are fighting to be recognized as human and have the freedom to express themselves and not be measured in tones that do not match with who they are.
And I think
there's the youth of South Africa are coming.
And I think one of the most educational thing, and it's not something that you're gonna get in school. I always say to my nieces and nephews, listen, sometimes you've got to go and get a passport. Just get, and it's not expensive, by the way, to travel to our neighboring countries.
Yes.
Get on a bus. You look on online, and you're just able to cross and experience, and just seeing there where you don't need to explain your blackness all the time. What are you doing here? Why are you? I mean, I went into a shop just now before we started. And this woman started like, so mama, how can I? No, just leave me alone. I'm looking. How?
Okay, we just have to round it up now. Thank you for joining us. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a beautiful conversation. I don't know if you have like any last words you'd like to say, any last thoughts before we round everything up.
I'll let you go.
Well, please, guys, I think it's very important to read and watch. I think a lot of people just go by what they see on Twitter and ask Rock on Twitter and stuff. But it's important. Don't get into a space where you say, I'm not going to vote these people because they stand for this based on what you have been hearing, as opposed to actually engaging on what the policy position is. Yes. So, please read. It's freeing. The 8% read and they manage to give the rest of you propaganda. Don't do it.
Zogiso spoke about being an internationalist earlier, and I think that I'm happy that the EFF has taken a clear position on, the Palestinian struggle.
Yes.
Because, guys, propaganda works. You have Black Christian Zionist South Africans who are defending Israel, Israel's right to exist, and blah, blah, blah. And I think that it's important for us, always the politics around having to free everyone, or recognizing that no one is free until we're all
free. Yes.
Which is also something that we, center in our politics. So I'm glad to see that kind of reflected in the work that the EFF is doing, because the imperialist beast will come for you, and we saw what happened in the White House, who they chose to ostracize. Right? It's the people who are speaking for the downtrodden, beyond our borders.
Yes.
Fighting political battles in Swaziland, in Namibia, a little bit
in Burkina Faso,
in Kenya.
Yes.
Taken to the White House to make a spectacle out of, and so I think that for me should only galvanize the efforts that you're already making, wishing you strength and long life.
And
all the best in the local elections.
Oh, please, we need, but we're going to work. But I actually forgot this last part when we were speaking about Palestine and Gaza. I mean, Zukiswa, you've been an incredible activist in this regard. You've spoken up, you've written about it. Like you said, you traveled there. Just as a parting, you also rescinded, you returned the Goethe Medal, which I think was highly earned, but you decided to return it because of the alignment with Israel. Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Okay, well...
just quickly as we round up, because I should have gone through this earlier.
The Germans gave me something called the Goethe Medal, which is a state medal that's given to non-Germans for contribution to culture in 2020. And I'm going to say that disturbing thing. I was the first Black woman to get it. And last year I gave it back to the German government for their complicity in the genocide in Gaza, but also they're the second largest country that's giving weapons. But, I would say that the 1%, and their people globally are responsible, for what's happening in Congo. So we need to look at it. What's happening in Congo? What's happening in Sudan?
Yes.
The killings. Those are the same weapons. The killings in Haiti. What's happening in Haiti? Those weapons are the same ones. And and we are 99%, but we decide to be Christian Zionists, and we actually miss the woods for the trees. We don't realize that the guns that we're seeing in El Dorado Park or in Cape Flats or in Kaelisha or in Gqeberha, because Gqeberha has become really big with weapons, are the same guns that are being manufactured and dumped on us, because as long as capital needs it. As long as we're fighting, we can't get together.
Yes, exactly.
And this goes way back. I mean, in 1974, John Foster was shopping for arms in Israel.
Yes.
So they had, very close relations. As I'm sure you know, South Africa was developing a nuclear program.
Yes,
with the
they were.
assistance of Israel.
Israel.
Yes.
And they continued up until, in fact, they were still selling or buying the weapons even when other countries were saying we're not doing business with apartheid Israel.
Yes.
The weapons that were probably killing our people, beyond 76, even in the 90s, during
the hostile wars, IFP,
exactly, those things, they were coming from Israel. So Israel has never been a friend to Black people. They've always been friends to the apartheid state and
and white
the people,
imperialism.
and imperialism, and the people will still talk about the good old days.
Yes. I mean, they're running away there because they're comfortable with apartheid.
Exactly. That's the reason why I was saying one of the largest groups in the world are white South Africans going to become settlers in Israel. And it's something that we should constantly question, constantly put on the table and understand that. And once we understand that, we understand how this beast hurts all of us.
Yeah,
and we need to fight. Exactly. And we need to fight together.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we can round up now. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. It was a beautiful podcast that we had. Sviso Kanyile, legendary documentary filmmaker, writer, archive researcher, and Zukiso Vanero, award-winning South African writer. Her new book is out, Love, Marry, Kill. If you find it somewhere, please read it. It's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.